Let me ask you something. When you picture Amazon making money, what do you actually picture? Cardboard boxes, a delivery van, maybe Jeff Bezos personally taping up a package labeled World Domination. That's the story you've been sold. It's also almost completely wrong, because the truth is, most of what actually keeps this company afloat has nothing to do with boxes at all. And by the end of this, you're going to feel a little silly for ever thinking otherwise. Let's rewind to the early 2000s, because this story doesn't start with some grand master plan to conquer the internet. It starts with something much more boring. Amazon's own internal engineers were exhausted. Every single time a team wanted to build a new feature, they had to rebuild the same basic database and storage infrastructure from scratch. Over and over again, nobody was innovating. Everybody was just reinventing the same boring wheel, project after project. So a guy named Andy Jassy, who at the time was serving as Jeff Bezos' technical assistant, basically his shadow, sat in on enough of these conversations to notice the pattern, and the fix wasn't glamorous. Build one standardized set of internal tools, storage, computing, databases, all the unsexy plumbing that every single team needs, but nobody wants to build twice. Just fixing an internal headache, essentially. That's it. That's the whole origin story. And then somebody asked the question that changes everything in this story. If our own teams need this so badly, don't other companies out there have the exact same headache? So in March of 2006, Amazon quietly opened up that internal plumbing to the public. No fanfare, no keynote moment. Just some storage and computing services with fairly forgettable names, available to anyone willing to pay for them. Nobody, and I mean nobody, thought this side project would end up being the actual point of the entire company. Which brings us to the reframe, because I need you to unlearn something before we go any further. You think Amazon is a retail giant that happens to dabble in cloud computing on the side. Flip that entirely around in your head, because it's actually the other way around. Amazon is, at its financial core, a massive server farm that also happens to run an e-commerce side hustle. And once you see the numbers, you cannot unsee it. Here's the deep dive, and I want you to actually sit with these figures because they are almost comically lopsided. In 2025, Amazon pulled in a staggering $716.9 billion in total revenue. Enormous number. The kind of number that makes you assume the boxes are printing money all by themselves. Except of that company's $80 billion in total operating income, $45.6 billion of it came from AWS alone. Just the cloud division, a division that represents a small fraction of that massive top-line revenue number, quietly responsible for over 57% of the entire company's operating profit. Let that sink in for a second. The part of Amazon you never think about is generating the majority of the profit. The part of Amazon you interact with constantly, the actual retail store, the boxes, the prime trucks, is running on margins so thin they're practically theoretical by comparison. And it's not slowing down either. By the first quarter of 2026, AWS posted a record operating margin of 37.7%. 37.7%. In 3 months alone, that single division generated $14.2 billion in pure profit. $14 billion in 90 days from a business that started because some engineers were sick of rebuilding the same database setup for the 100th time. That's not a side project anymore. That's the actual engine room, and retail is just the shiny paint job on the outside of the ship. So here's the counterintuitive twist, and this is the part that should genuinely change how you think about the entire company. Amazon didn't set out to become the landlord of the internet. They stumbled into it completely by accident while trying to fix their own boring internal IT problem. But that's exactly what happened, because once AWS existed, once it was reliable, scalable, and cheaper than building your own server infrastructure from scratch, everybody started renting space in Amazon's house. Massive streaming platforms run huge portions of their infrastructure through AWS. Rival tech companies that are actively trying to beat Amazon in other markets, still quietly pay Amazon every single month just to keep their own servers online. Thousands of startups, the scrappy little companies that supposedly represent competition and disruption, are paying rent to the biggest player in the room just to exist at all. Even government agencies rely on this infrastructure. Amazon accidentally built a toll booth on the road that the entire modern internet drives through, and everyone just quietly pays the toll, because at this point, there's genuinely nowhere else to go that's this reliable at this scale. Think about how absurd that actually is for a second. Your favorite streaming service, some scrappy AI startup you saw on social media last week, maybe even a company that directly competes with Amazon's retail business. All of them are, in some way, funding Amazon's operations just by existing online. That's not a business model. That's a monopoly on the plumbing, dressed up as a helpful cloud service with a friendly logo. Now let's bring this into the present, because there's a modern mirror here that's honestly a little unsettling once you notice it. Right now, the entire tech industry is losing its mind over artificial intelligence. Every company on Earth wants to be the one that builds the next great AI model. Billions of dollars are being poured into this race, constantly, by companies desperate to win. And here's the thing about Amazon in the middle of all that chaos. They genuinely do not care who wins the AI race. Not really. Because whoever wins, whoever loses, whichever startup becomes the next big thing or flames out spectacularly next year, all of them need one thing to even attempt building AI in the first place: massive amounts of compute power, servers, storage, infrastructure, and guess who's sitting there calmly at a 37% profit margin, selling exactly that to every single player in the game, regardless of who ends up on top. Amazon isn't betting on a winner in the AI gold rush. They're selling the pickaxes and the shovels to literally everyone digging at a markup while staying comfortably out of the actual risk of the gold rush itself. That's not participating in a hype cycle. That's profiting off of everyone else's hype cycle forever, no matter how it turns out. So next time you order something on Amazon and you watch that little delivery van pull away from your porch, just remember what's actually keeping the lights on behind that transaction. It's not the box. It's not the 2-day shipping. It's some server farm you'll never see, quietly billing half the internet every single month, born out of nothing more dramatic than a few tired engineers who just didn't want to build the same database twice. Anyway, that's Amazon for you. Built an entire cardboard empire on top of a server closet nobody was supposed to notice. My mate's cold. My faith in everything stores is somewhere in a warehouse getting picked and packed. And somewhere in Seattle, Andy Jassy is probably just sitting back, watching everyone panic over AI, cashing the rent checks. Either way,